Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for being on our Healthy Widow, Healthy Woman podcast. And we have a very special guest today. We are having a conversation with Dr. Joel Hunter on faith, social impact, justice, and widowhood. Hello.
Hi, Carolyn. Good to be on.
I know. I'm going to give you a little bit of background here for just a minute while Dr. Joel sits humbly while I share this. Your current role is actually pastor of community benefit for Action Church here in Central Florida. And you're also like the chairman of the Central Florida Pledge campaign, which we're going to talk about. But let me give you a little bit of background on Joel. His father, who was a World War II veteran, died when Joel was 4 years old, and he was raised by his mom and his maternal grandparents, who taught him to always love people who were different. Now, as a young adult at Ohio University, he became involved in the civil rights movement when Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. And you experienced a crisis of faith that ultimately led you to give your life completely to Christ and to enter ministry. You have your education is a Bachelor in Science in Education from Ohio University, a Master of Divinity from Christian Theological Seminary, and a doctorate in ministry in 1974. Now, you served as the pastor to you grew the second largest Methodist church in Indiana, and then you moved to Orlando. You were started attending Northland Church in the early 80s, and then you became the senior pastor. I'm not sure for how many years. You probably know.
32 years. 32 years.
32
Yeah.
years, yes. Growing that congregation from a couple hundred people meeting in a former skating rink that a lot of people in Central Florida remember, to about 20,000 weekly attendees at 3 locations. The church's motto evolved from "We love everyone who walks in the door" to "We love everybody who will never walk in the door." And that reflected your commitment to serving beyond the church walls. And that's important to know for what we're going to learn today. You served as spiritual advisor to President Obama during his entire 8 years in office, and you were appointed to the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. You were also named by Grist Magazine, which is an independent media back then dedicated to telling stories about creating a just future. And you were listed as the top 15 religious leaders, along with Pope Benedict XV and Dalai Lama. You've served 3 years as the chairman of Central Florida's Commission on Homelessness. And after stepping down from Northland, you spent 5 years leading a nonprofit, networking with churches and local charities to locate resources and benefits that would benefit those struggling in the community. Orlando Magazine has named you the #1 most powerful voice for philanthropy and community engagement and listed you among Orlando's 50 most powerful 6 years in a row. You are the chairman of the Central Florida Pledge campaign, which I can't wait to share with everyone, which is a call to action for residents to create safe and inclusive communities. The pledge asks residents to commit to treating all people with kindness and respect, especially with those whom you disagree. And your interfaith and social justice work, oh my goodness, you have urged all faith leaders really on issues of human trafficking and homelessness and hunger and prison reform. And I believe that you're about to add widow support and grief to growth to your long list of advocacy. You have been married to Becky for 53 years,
Yeah.
right? Your partner in life and ministry, and raised 3 sons and 6 grandchildren. And how many great-grandchildren? Great-grandchildren? Whoops. Did we lose you? Uh-oh, you stalled there for a second.
Okay.
I said, how many great-grandchildren?
2 great grandchildren.
Wonderful. I'm going to share a quote of yours, and I hope it's correct. People respect strength, but they connect at weakness. If you're going through a rough time, you're just in training to help someone who's going through a rough time. So lift as you climb. And I am guessing that the many losses that you have faced, from your father to your son to your granddaughter, has informed your ministry and approach to bringing harmony in the world. And I just have to start with, why in the world did it take us so long to meet in person, living in the same town?
Well, I suspect the reason is we both been a little busy, Carolyn.
Yeah,
You
thank you.
know,
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I think you're right. I mean, most people don't know much about, if they're listening and they don't know much about you, they just learned very quickly, um, a lot, of years. But your loss story does inform, am I correct, in how you see the world? I think between the civil rights movement and your own personal losses over this time, what do you have to share? Uh,
well, we'll start out with, my dad died when I was 4 years old, and my mom being widowed, um, trying to raise two kids on her own. She went back to school to become a beautician. My grandparents kind of filled in the gaps, but I have a huge respect for widows who um, struggle with life's responsibilities without the support of a spouse. James 1:27 talks about true religion is talking, pays attention and cares for the widows and orphans. I just started out with a great deal of gratitude for people who would step in and support people who had suffered just giant losses in their lives. And then, later on, we went through some of that. Becky and I went through it together, both with the loss of a granddaughter who was 5 years old and developed a brain tumor and was taken to heaven. I can remember President Obama being so caring during that time. He called me up and said, we just heard, what can we do? And I just, I'd been pastoring him for a
Mhm.
while. He came to Christ late in his life, and so but I just lost it. I just broke down and I just started crying because I just talked with Francis Collins, a friend of mine who was the head of the NIH, and I said, Francis, what do we do? And he said, I'm so sorry, Joel. He said, there's just no precedent. There's no procedure for a 5-year-old with a stage 4 glioblastoma, so I related that to the president. I'm crying, and we reversed roles, and all of a sudden he started pastoring me, and he said, "Now wait a minute, I want you to know." And he started out with, "What can Michelle and I do?" And I said, "Just pray." But he ended up with, "Remember, you're not in this alone. God's with you. You have people who love you." And so, uh, as we have gone through this, and then with the loss of my son, um, um, the same thing happened with those who will not come up with all the answers that you're
Mhm.
not ready to hear,
Mhm.
but they will just be with you. And I talked to another widow one time, and I said, "What got you through this?" Pastors are always looking for, what can we say that helps?
Mhm.
And she said to me, "I don't remember anything anybody said, but I remember the hugs." And I've never forgotten that. And so a part of my great experience and my guidance in ministry is just being with people, just letting them know they're not alone. That not only is God with them, but there are other people who just will do whatever we can to not leave them alone and not make them feel like they're now isolated because they've been through this traumatic experience.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I remember that was one of the Cindy Price who we were talking about actually went to church in that roller skating rink,
Yeah.
uh, Northland Church. She, when her husband passed away, James, she remembered you hugging her. So that's
Mm.
interesting that that got passed on to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But the fact that we pour so much into others, in your instance, this story with President Obama, he then mirrored that back to you. And that is what's so beautiful about compassionate care. It does come back to you
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
no one is exempt from experiencing heartache and heartbreak.
Yeah.
Um, and in this country, part of what we are doing at MWC, Modern Widows Club, and the Movement for Widow Care is asking people to have that for more widowed women in specifically and their families.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work to do in that area. And like with you, I love that you, when you came to the Faith Leader Summit that we had earlier this year, you were there to learn. And
Yeah.
I love that. And I shared, at that summit, listen, a big part of the reason why the faith community, it's just a lack of awareness and education and understanding the life that widows are journeying through, but even beyond the grief. And I said, faith-based universities and secular universities alike aren't creating curriculums around widowhood, around women's
Yeah.
studies and what it is. And that's at a very fundamental level. We have to eventually create those curriculums. So when younger faith leaders are coming out, they're extremely educated. So I love that you made that point. Um, so the Faith Leader Summit that we had earlier, like what was your overall sort of um, reflection on that? We had so many different faith leaders from different backgrounds. So that must have been wonderful for you with
Yeah.
what you're doing with the Central Florida Pledge, which we'll talk about. How did that feel to be in a room with everyone talking from so many different faiths together about?
Well, it felt wonderful, Carolyn, and thank you so much for organizing that and for making us aware of this incredible resource among us that a lot, no, most faith leaders have no idea about.
Yeah.
It is the most natural, duh, why would we not know about this? And so there were two major impressions. First of all, as you started out, how could I be this long in this community? I've been in ministry for 55 years.
Mhm.
And how could I be this long in this community and not be aware of the Modern Widows Club and what you all are doing, and have that as a major resource in the churches that I'm related to. And so that was the first thing. The other thing is this has such an across the board constituency. I mean, this is such a broad, I mean, regretfully so, but
Yeah.
everybody is touched by widowhood in some way. They know someone, they've been through this. And so um, to see the broadness of the need,
Mhm.
and then to understand that every faith organization, well, we'll just talk about those for a minute because that's kind of my expertise. But every faith organization can apply it with their own scriptures, with their own way that they do things. I think one of the great things about congregations is that every congregation is different, just like every person is different. Every congregation has kind of a love language, if you will, just like every person has a different love language. One of the first articles I wrote for a leadership magazine, this is back in the 70s, was entitled Romancing the Congregation. And it was all about how to love your congregation in a way that they feel appreciated and they feel cared for, but distinctive from everybody else. It's not just a blanket, this is how you do it. And so seeing so many different congregations represented that day at that faith forum, um, um, and not just Christian, but there were Muslim folks there and people of other faith backgrounds. It's exciting to know that all of them probably have a distinct approach that just needs to be activated and taught by some basic curriculum resources that you all are developing, and that we badly need because obviously we don't have them yet. So it's just I felt really pumped coming out of there.
Thank you. Thank you. In 2019, I actually approached a donor and I said, I really need to go talk to some of the top, well-known pastors in this country. So I did. I took a road trip and I met Joel Osteen and Dodie Osteen, and I met Rick Warren, and I went to Greg Laurie and Harvest Ministries. I started saying, what would happen if we had this big national day and we actually cared for widows and their families and we learned from them. And Saddleback Church actually ran with it. And part of
Mm,
it was, I think, him losing his son. Chris
mhm.
was very close to
Yeah.
him. He understood the ripple effect it had on people. And so that was it was wonderful to see.
You
So
know,
my
not to interrupt you, but I'm sorry, but to interrupt. When my son died in the same way his son died, Rick
Mhm.
Warren was one of the first people to call me up. And he
Oh,
said, and we knew each other, and he said, Joel, you and I have just joined a club no one wants to be a part of.
wow.
And both of them had committed suicide. Um, and 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 I think of the Modern Widows Club in that way. You know, nobody wants to be a part of a modern, you know,
Right.
but it's there's a connection there that
Mhm,
is
mhm.
so deep because of a mutual pain, it doesn't surprise me that Rick was one of the first ones to pick it up.
Yeah, he was very sad that his wife wasn't there that day that I
Mhm.
came, because he said, I really would have loved for you to meet her.
Yeah.
Um, I think meeting other people who have grieved very deeply is extremely healing to be
Mhm.
around. But there's also always a commitment to this awareness and education piece, right?
Yeah.
I was a member of Isaac's church.
Mm.
All of this happened, and my heart broke because I knew a new young widow was
Yeah.
created, and the
Yeah.
ripple effect that that was going to have on your family. And we never met. We've only talked about this right
Mm.
now.
Yeah.
But honestly, I moved to that church because my children loved the kids ministry. I
Mm.
left my place of worship to go there for my children.
Hmm.
I was very concerned about your grandchildren, and your family was in my prayers that whole time. And
Thank you.
now here we are.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, that faith leader summit that we had, can't that happen on a national level?
Oh, it should be able to. Yeah, it should be able to. I don't know how you gather all of the leaders that would need to do it. But I mean, that could happen. It could happen virtually. It wouldn't even have to happen in the same place.
Right.
But yeah, it should be a conversation that is represented by well-respected leaders.
Mhm.
Just to understand, this is it carries with it some automatic credibility. And so that would be a very worthy goal. Yeah.
Yeah. And because you've been in ministry for 55 years and you're like, duh, what's I mean, now you're like, oh my, the filter's off now. Now
Mhm.
I've seen the difference. What do you think is the biggest like obstacles to getting places of worship to really elevate widow support?
I think just because I've been doing this for so long, there are a lot of people who want to recruit um, congregations into a movement for a very good cause. Um, but the first place they go is usually the senior pastor.
Yeah.
And usually the senior pastor has, if they're a big church, they've already gotten kind of a circle of protection around them that doesn't,
As they should.
and even if you break through,
Right.
that person has so many requests every week and so many projects already going on in his own
Hey,
congregation or her own congregation that they can't just handle another one. So I think the greatest obstacle is finding a champion within the congregation itself. Because if you as a member of the congregation go to senior leadership and say, look, this is a um, this is a ministry, this is a service that will touch so many people already in our congregation, that will draw so many people, more people who are not being cared for into our congregation. And I will take care of the leadership of this, or I've already recruited a team of three of us. You don't have to run it. You don't have to manage it. Just give us space and a little bit of, hey, this is one of our ministries. We'll do the
yep.
rest. And so I think the obstacle is um, the um, the the common way of approaching um, a congregation to become involved is usually the wrong approach. The right approach is you already come to them with answers, and so that they can say, at Northland, we had um, back in the day, Cindy could tell you this, probably the greatest singles ministry in Orlando. I mean, it was just unbelievable, and it was run by a math teacher. Um, and he came into the elders one day and he said, I'd like to start a singles ministry. Well, I don't want to base it on being single. I want to base it. I want for singles by singles, but I want us to be able to serve others. And I'll run it. And he named two or three others that we already knew were responsible people. And all you guys have to do is say is yes. And boy, he didn't even get the sentence out of his mouth. We said yes. And they blew this thing. There had to be 600 or 800 singles involved in this thing uh,
Oh,
because because there was somebody who was willing. They felt a call within
mhm,
that congregation to take responsibility. And so if you can find that person
mhm.
in congregations, it'll spread very quickly.
I think I remember that. And I
Yeah.
think I remember it at Discovery Church and then in Summit. And I remember thinking, I want this except for widows.
Hmm.
Because if we have 80,000
Yeah.
widows in Central Florida, there's no reason why we can't do this. And I remember going to the Global Leadership Summit, right? You go, you see all the speakers, and they always challenge you, what are your gifts that you can put towards leadership? And I just went, there's a lot of things that I can do.
Hmm.
But I really think that widow support and empowerment and leadership is where God's calling me.
Yeah.
And
Good.
so, like this is where Modern Widows Club started. You're seeing where they sat and where
Mhm.
it all began 12 years ago. And biblically, for me, it was like welcoming strangers into my home. Yeah,
Mm.
that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And they're going to be in distress, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to feed them and share compassion. And that was the simpleness of what this wasn't a movement. I only knew my own story and a couple others. And so, like, I love that you just described that, because I think some of our ladies have gotten frustrated with going into places versus how do I make an impact.
Hmm.
um, and some of those, like, that's a great example. Like, what about smaller churches? What about the
Mhm.
smaller ones that I grew up
Yeah.
in Arkansas? What kind of advice would you give to them? Um,
Yeah. Just exactly the same thing. Just start a group. Carolyn, you did that, and because you it met the need,
mhm.
then it multiplied. And
Yeah, yeah.
any person who has this it doesn't even have to, they don't have to say I have a calling, but this concern um,
Mhm,
can just start a conversation with two or three ladies.
mhm.
It will attract others. And it doesn't take very long for the leadership of that congregation to say, see, that's what we're talking about right there. This is our ministry now.
Well, I have to say, I don't know how far it got up, even if Isaac even knew that I was wanting to start a widow's ministry, at Summit. It probably got to the men's and the women's, leadership leader.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they're typically young, on the younger side, right? So
Hmm.
they were like, widowhood, we don't have any widows here. Um, and then your daughter-in-law became widowed. And it was
Hmm.
heartbreaking for me because I went, that could have been something she stepped into. But so at the time, I felt rejected. And a lot of
Hmm.
widows feel this way, right? But it was really protection. I wasn't ready. I actually wasn't ready to do what I'm doing right now, to
Yeah.
leave the whole interior design career and then go into widow advocacy. I had
Hmm.
a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And that was sitting with thousands of widows and seeing patterns, right?
Hmm.
And some of what you do now, because I do want to talk about the Central Florida Pledge because it's so important. And Modern Widows Club has signed the pledge, but I want to tell people, and I have the website, I'm going to show it for those who watch this on video. Um, I love your title is the moment you come to the page, Building America's Most Welcoming Community.
Hmm.
This isn't about politics, it's about people and businesses, treating all people with dignity and respect, especially when they disagree. I'm going to let you share. I have a description here, but why don't you share? How did
Absolutely. It started um, after the uh, October 7th attack and the Jewish community attack from Hamas. We noticed in Central Florida there was a rise in episodes of anti-Semitism, corresponding rise in Islamophobia, and a Jewish philanthropist came to me and said, "Would you help me organize our region?" This is key because communities have a great deal of impact on how they grow. We can't manage what's going on in the Middle East. We can't manage what's going on in the nation. We can't manage what's going on in the state, but we really can make a huge impact in our own community. So basically, it started, and you'll hear common language here, to guard vulnerable communities that were under attack for who they are or what they believed.
Mhm,
And in this case, it was different communities, that had been discriminated against or somehow had gone through a very difficult time. Not just Jews and Muslims, but LGBTQ folks and
mhm,
racism. We've always had a problem with racism, but generally speaking, the heart was if one of our neighbors is going through a rough time, we need to stand with them. And we need to make sure that they feel like they're not left out, that
mhm,
they belong, that they're appreciated, they're valued. And so we developed this commitment. And I say we, not the organization, but the actual leaders of the community. It started when we gathered 50 respected and recognized leaders at the Alfond Inn and just say, is this a need in our community? That we would create a community of treating each other with respect, especially those with whom we disagree.
mhm.
And all of them said, yeah. 2 weeks later, we had 100 in that same space community leaders, and there was everybody in that room. I mean, all the spectrums, everybody from Mel Martinez to Annie Escalante, all the spectrum of political leaders, of law enforcement, of college presidents, of business leaders, of nonprofit leaders, faith leaders. Every sector was signing up for the same thing, and that was to create a community where people felt safe and valued, especially those who were fearful
Mhm.
and felt isolated and left out. And so I can see how really how the widow community just fits right into that because you talk about feeling alone and
Stigmatized,
underappreciated and yeah, criticized.
marginalized.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So it's a very vulnerable thing. And so we wanted to be a community where um, all of us who wanted to know how better to love our neighbors, wanted to start with those who were in the most vulnerable position. And so that's kind of the Central Florida Pledge, how it got started.
Love it. It's, I want to ask you this question. Do you feel like you're reliving the 60s all over again?
Oh my goodness, I really do. It's crazy. I was, a part of the total unrest of the 60s,
Yes.
right in the middle of it. Um, but the but the but the problem these days, Carolyn, and you know this, is back in the 60s, we were all going for justice, but all of us realized that we were the sinners too. I mean, we were nobody. We were just average people who wanted others to have a fair shake.
Mhm.
Nowadays, the difference is we have just as much unrest, but there's this steady feed of poison and suspicion, people just animosity and accusation, and people who disagree are treated as the enemy and as a real danger. And so we want to make sure that we're a counterbalance to that, to say no, disagreement is a part of enhancing our understanding. It's a way that we know people better and what they think and why they think of it. And it's not, it's not an attack, it's an opportunity to love somebody for who they are and to understand more about their lives. And that's just a much healthier kind of community that's going to be safer for our kids to grow up in.
I think that I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. I was actually born in LA, in the city of angels. And I remember growing up, going to a very small Southern Baptist church and
Mhm.
school. And my parents were very, there was the Central High School, civil rights issues going on in Little Rock, Arkansas. I
Mhm.
remember my parents openly talking and taking us to people's homes who were different than us being raised, and said, is that really how you want to treat? So would you want to be treated if that's
Yeah.
your faith or if that's your uh, ethnicity, if that's your, do you want to be treated that way? Because you're no different than they are. And so
Mm.
so I grew up with these conversations. I was born in 63. So what a
Mhm.
tumultuous year, right? And
Yeah.
then these informative years
Oh,
of
yeah.
7 years old up to 10, this was my world. My parents constantly, and they were non-voters. They were completely out of the political world. They said those people are going to do what they want to do. You, however, on a day-to-day basis are going to do what you know
Yeah.
is the right thing to do. And I think that's kind of played into me going, I'll just open up my door to strangers.
Absolutely. You had some good parents there. That they were wise in advance of their time. Good for them.
Well, thank you. I think so. We were definitely the weird ones.
That's good weird.
Yeah, a good world, good trouble. Yeah.
Yep.
So the Sid Florida Pledge, what do you want that to turn into over the next 10 years?
Well, yeah, I really want for us to create a culture here
Mhm.
um, where we are really looking out for those who are being left out. I want everybody to feel welcome.
Mhm.
We started out, and we now have over 5,000 individual signatures of people who have said, these are many, most of them are community leaders who have said, I personally will treat all people with respect, especially those with whom I disagree. I will watch my rhetoric so that it is not weaponized against somebody.
Mhm.
I will report hate incidents to somebody else if we need to respond, and we have on a couple of occasions. Um, and I will educate myself as to what they're going through, and so we started out with individuals. Now we have a student movement that has, I don't know how many, I should know this, colleges and high schools represented. Dr. Phillips High School leading the way here, but all of the local colleges and student governments, UCF, Stetson, Rollins, all of them have signed on.
Yeah.
Um, but
Thank
the
you.
but the new kind of deal here is, and I think Modern Widows Club has signed on as an organization, is going to organizations now and saying, would you as an organization sign on to this, both for the good of your customers and for the good of your community?
Mhm.
And so we have all of these major organizations signing on now. Um, um, Rosen Hotels and the iDrive Chamber of Commerce with all the 800-pound gorillas, Universal and Disney and all of those folks, and they're all signing on now because they want for visitors to know
Mhm.
that they are welcome here and this is a safe place and we watch out for each other. Um, but what is good for the visitors is really good for the residents. That's it's the same kind of deal there. So this thing has really grown into a very hopeful movement in the midst of a messy and mad world.
Yes. Well, I was at a Four Roots Institute breakfast this morning and I saw your logo and it was standing room only
Yeah,
for the breakfast. And they're talking, of course, about food being medicine, but it all works together in the community.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I will tell you that I I look back and I think about starting a widow's ministry at within the walls of a church and
mm,
how it was so meant for me to create a ministry outside the walls
mhm,
because I realized in widowhood so many women feel faith-based widowed groups are actually creating more exclusion than
mm,
inclusion.
mm.
I wanted Muslim, Jewish, and Christian and agnostic and atheist widows to come
Absolutely.
together in the same room because it wasn't about your particular faith. It was the fact that you have gone through a horrific grief experience.
Yeah,
You are in distress, and this is impacting your actual overall health. And
absolutely.
that was such a different approach. People were like, what is that? And I will tell you, I have been denied funding because I will not go and become one particular faith.
Yeah, good for
I
you.
will-
That is funding you can do without because it leaves people out. You don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
leave
yeah.
people out.
I
People
can't create an inclusive community of widows when I, in fact, am participating in inclusion.
exactly, exactly. God so loved the world here. I mean, it's everybody needs care. And you were right when you said um, basically you reap what you sow.
Mhm.
If you start sowing exclusion, you're going to reap division. But if you love everybody in the way they need to be loved, then that's what the world kind of turns into. So, good for you.
But it's also a lot of people feel uncomfortable with doing that because I will tell you, we tell stories of legendary widows. We share stories of all kinds of widows. But I
Hmm.
will tell you, if a widow has any kind of predominant faith affiliation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have to set our filters on social media. We did one post about 3 months ago and got 9,000 hate comments on a widow support site.
Yeah. I
So managing that, right? Walking the line of creating a just future. These are the real champions in
yeah.
society, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. I don't do social media. Becky keeps all that stuff
Lucky you.
she keeps me informed. But yeah, this culture right now is so triggered to be accusatory and to have this interpretation of suspicion and it's got to be my way or the highway. But honestly, the more we learn about people who are not like us, that's what the broader we're able to love. It doesn't mean we're compromising our beliefs. It just means that our beliefs really um, apply generally instead of just in our own little bubble.
Mhm. I think that widowhood, and I think I'm in a time in history where actually widow support and widowhood is a uniter.
Mm-hmm.
It is nonpartisan. It
Good.
is in New Jersey. It took me 3 years to get International Widows Day to be an actual state mandated day of observance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 100%.
Yeah.
Everyone voted for it. So that
Wow.
showed, now I'd like to do Florida and keep going and have an actual national day to align with the United Nations from 10 years ago to
Mm-hmm.
create International Widows Day. So that's, but the work happens when every conversation and every podcast and every, you keep going. You're doing this very similar thing that we're doing, but a different demographic of people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
creating a more just world for widows is what I could say.
Yeah.
And we all can feel good about that because
Yeah.
like I said, we will all be impacted. It was interesting today at Four Rivers, I mean at Four Roots, they showed this graph of how food um, we're getting further away from the lifespan. Food is impacting the life longevity. And
Yeah.
they showed the graph when the pandemic happened and how it dipped and our age, uh, uh, how long we actually live, I forget what they call it, dropped. And
Yeah.
I leaned to the person next to me and I said, our Modern Widows Club grew 900% during that drop because more
Mm.
men died and left widows during that time.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yet I could not get anyone to understand how what the growth was doing. But
Mm.
but you share those stories, sharing it with
Yeah.
you. But I saw that and talked to them and said, this is powerful
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. So how do you see, last question as we finish here, how do you see the pledge, faith-based and secular organizations and communities,
Yeah.
mm, and widow support complementing each other? How do we make widow support more known? Um,
Well, in conversations like this, we've got to realize that um, there is a synergy when um, organizations and networks who have um, mutually alignable goals. We want to care for people who are hurting. No matter whether they're being discriminated because they're Jewish or they have gone through a trauma in losing their spouse. Both of them are hurting, and so as we become more integrated in the way we do things, every time somebody vows to treat all people with respect, that's going to include some widows, and every time a widow goes from grieving to growing,
Mhm.
to actually being equipped for leadership, that's going to benefit our community. That's going to achieve our, the Central Florida Pledge's goals. And so we're mutually aligned in this thing. And I think that our wonderful entanglement is going to help each network grow.
I agree. And I think that when on Thursday, when I saw you, people always ask me, what do I want my legacy to be? And I say, really, it was just very innocent to just reduce one person's suffering.
Mhm.
Because when we do that, then they want to turn around and do that for another.
Right.
So asking you, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, golly. It just, um, I think that I don't really think of my legacy very much because it just never occurs to me. Uh,
Glad I
just
caught
want-
you.
yeah, no, no, I think, I want people to, um, first of all, believe that there is a God who loves them because they ran into a guy who loved them for who they were. And secondly, I want folks to be motivated to go help somebody because um, that's what love is. It's helping, and often in a sacrificial way, because love costs. But if the world, we were taught to pray when I was little, "Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And so I want to feel like maybe the earth became a little bit more like heaven because I fumbled around for as long as I did. That's very unsophisticated, but that's the best I can come up with.
No, I think that resonates with a lot of people who do see the good in the world, do see their participation as mattering
Yeah.
and the significance of it. No matter, I think of my parents and how humble they were, and how, my dad, an auto mechanic, would always hire the black pastor
Mm, mm,
mechanics.
mm,
I think about that and go, I was felt to be safe in that environment, that he had another job and that job was being a pastor. And yet during the week, he worked hard.
yeah.
Those were very significant. You don't realize they're significant when you're younger, but it's softball being our coaches, telling us you have different roles in life. That's what sports taught us. He would, that my daughters must do sports. They must
Mm,
learn how to stand up to the bat, and they're on their own there. But as a team, you're working, towards a goal. He chose me as a pitcher, which um, I asked him, and I'm going to share this. I said, Dad, why did you pick me to be the pitcher? And he said, you work well under pressure,
good.
and you understand everyone's role, and you're a great leader. And so as a young woman, that was very impressionable to me.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want to thank you so much for your time today, because I want to encourage everyone to go and see. It is centralfloridapledge.com. And what happens when you aren't in Central Florida? All of
What
our
happened?
listeners are around
Oh,
the world.
yeah. Well, the paradigm here is that um, we have the most influence in our own communities. And so Central Florida Pledge is powerful because we just want to focus on the DNA of our community. But any community can do this very same thing. It's a very simple process of recruiting leaders to treat people with respect. And so any community in the world can do this. It's just simple. And if they want help, have them contact me and I'll be glad to help.
Well, that sounds like you're creating a whole bunch of hope around the world.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, Carolyn. You're doing exactly the same thing, and your ministry is so needed. And I just am honored to be on with you.
Thank you. Well, all I can say, Dr. Hunter, is to be continued.
Great. Amen. Amen. Those are great words.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being on the Healthy Widow, Healthy Woman podcast. And thank you all for listening today. It's been such an honor. God bless you.